higher taxes yearly. This is what the Standard is holding this morning. Kenyans should brace themselves for continued increase in levies of Ruto's presidency after he revealed that his ultimate aim is to push the country's tax to GDP ratio from 14 to 22%, despite a pushback by taxpayers who protest at the move and complain that their dues are never put to good use. This is what we're discussing, of course, this morning with the panelists here. Before we took a short break, we were just to hear from Bunyasi Shakwan. And I wanted just to ask Bunyasi, before you go on with your comments. You know, earlier we heard that we saw that US was demanding public policy on Kenya tax, trade, and that is Kenya tax and trade rules. And they were saying that the US is demanding that Kenya grants traders and the public bigger say in regulatory changes to safeguard their rights, including accommodating their views and granting them sufficient time to comply. And this is in light of what Bilo is saying. Is anyone listening? Because even them, they were raising the same questions as well.
Yeah, these public processes, political and administrative processes are, you can never know when enough is enough or it's too little, too late, as always. So that's always the going in position of the different parties to it. And I think the very fact that there is an exchange and dialogue must, and if that's continued, must mean that even the government side is listening and is willing to continue to engage. They may be constrained in their own way for pushing a certain particular outcome, but the reality at the end of the day is what matters. What's the reality? The reality would be that in economics, they're talking about elasticities. You can push a price up to a point, it will bring in a bit more, and then you reach a point where you level off, and for every extra shilling you're putting on, you might reduce consumption, so that the base on which you're taxing is not growing, it's perhaps even shrinking. So those are natural limits in the economic system that limit countries. But now, to relate this over time, Bilo has used not only today, many times before, what happened in the Kibaki era. I think we must remember, first and foremost, Kibaki came in at a time when the economy was entirely on its knees. That's probably not even the right word. It was below its knees. I mean, I don't know how much lower it can get on that. So, any quantum change has a big impact. Looks big, looks nice. The gains in the Kibaki era during the first term were greater than in the second term. Not that they did less in the second term, but it's just that now by the second term, the base was building on the gains they had made. And this thing is exponential. Something grows on what you had before. And if it goes down, coming out looks better than when you're adding on top of it. That's not to excuse the fact that the issue of the rate of taxes and the pace at which you want to introduce those taxes needs to be managed properly. How do you sequence them? Who do you bring in first before whom? When do you have a modest rate increase, a significant expenditure reduction, so that the base is also, if you're just looking at what would we want to finance, because we compare taxes to GDP, but there are other comparisons to make. You compare revenue to expenditure also. So you can say we can achieve a balance or an improved balance or the ratio we are seeking so that our borrowing will be X if we can cut expenditure on this, delay. Now I would say, for example, where do you cut? Go to the DP's complex and say we can do 2.6 billion. These are the headlines are saying. We'll do 600 million to do the following A, B, C, D things that are essential. But there are many other examples. Now we're in a year in which floods have really ravaged. And so the shocks that are hitting this economy, some of them are not even long-term. Of course, there are aspects of floods that are long-term, but some of them are short-term and have to be dealt with right away. So how will today's budget, proposed budget, be reflective of the shock to the economy and be reflective of the desire for long-term development, which you can pace out more slowly. Those balances are what the Treasury mandarins ought to be having, and in my view, it's not enough for this country, for the president to be the only discussant on this issue on the table. He has made his announcement. Now there are others who should come out and elaborate and discuss it more clearly as to what they want to do. And Parliament should be listening very carefully, so that when whatever they're going to pass finally must be something that is consistent with what Kenyans might live with or will be able to live with, and not simply say, this is what we want, let us pass it, and so on. I heard Kimani Ichung'wah denying that they don't do it that way, and I hope that's the case. But in fact, there is always robust discussion back and forth and so on. So we have these 7 days in which that's going to occur, and Kenyans are highly charged. The public benefit organizations working in this sector are ready, I'm sure, with arguments. And let's hope we're going to have a robust exchange on this. But it must not be, the president has thrown out the opening gambit, the opening flare. Now it is for his mandarins and other people to expound on what exactly they have in mind, so we can have a useful debate.
All right.
Can I add something? I think one of the questions you should be asking, and I will keep on hammering this, there are new revenues, there are new taxes. But if you're employed, for example, has your salary gone up? If you're self-employed, has your profit gone up? Has your income gone up? And I think that's the best way to bring this debate to the level of the common man. Because people don't want to hear about taxes. They want to hear about money. Are we making money? At the moment you make money, you have no problem with paying taxes. Number two, if you look at the statistics from KRA, they are really hitting their target, which is probably a very good indicator that we need not to increase taxes but reduce them. And I've always argued that we may be surprised that by reducing the tax rates, we probably could collect more taxes. Because nobody by now has told us which is the best tax rate in this country that will give us the highest tax rate or tax revenue, using the rough as curve. And I think this government has been very good in experimenting, and I don't see why they cannot experiment with reducing tax rates, and we see what happens. And then the last one is, we are talking about taking care of somebody's residence. There are a lot of things in this country that can wait. A lot of us live in houses that are dilapidated and we don't repair them because there are other priorities. So can we focus on our priorities?
Indeed. And this is where the government has also admitted that the physical consolidation initiatives have failed to bear fruits in the current financial year, despite some key cost-cutting measures. National Treasury Principal Secretary Chris Kiptoo told MPs that the budget deficit rose to 908.6 billion shillings from 866 billion shillings in the 2023-2024 financial year. This is an increase of 22.6 billion shillings despite a stop on all government projects and tea in all public offices, in line with proposals of physical consolidation from the International Monetary Fund. This is a rise from 5.5% or to GDP to 5.6% following the change. The government has had to revise its borrowing plan for both the local and international market. Kiptoo said the government will do a net foreign financing of 315 billion shillings and net domestic financing of 592 billion shillings to equal the 908.6 billion shillings. This will be an increase from the 474 billion shillings that the state set out to borrow in the supplementary budget one. Right, we want to see these austerity measures. The tea also, it was the tea they were going for.
Let me first, you know, this thing about, this is what the president was talking about, that I want to increase taxes so that I can, work on to reduce the fiscal deficit. But in reality, you are seeing now that 2023-24 year is not even ended. And the time they actually spend most is the last quarter, April, May, June. So you can bet that that figure of 5.6 now that the PS talked about will probably be above 6, would be in the region of 6.5, probably by the time the year is concluded and we have the figures, a few months from now. But clearly, what I want to, there's a point that I think I just wanted to emphasize before I come to those territories.
Yes.
You see, when you talk about this country, and we keep comparing this country to America and to what some MP has said, that, you know, we're the least taxed country, because look at Norway, look at Germany, look at, you know, South Africa. When you look at it, this is a country where 1/3 of our GDP is coming from the informal sector. In fact, it's estimated. It's not even, you can't calculate. And that same 1/3 of the economy is the one that creates up to 80% of the employment. This is the employment that you expect the government wants to collect taxes on. You can't then compare us with America, for example, those countries. America's informal sector is only 3%. I mean, this is, so when you keep talking of you want to raise tax to this percentage of GDP because other countries in OECD and America are doing it, for heaven's sake, those countries are completely different in every dynamic that you want to look. You cannot compare. You are comparing eggs with apples. Completely. I mean, it's misplaced. So I think it's important that the government really looks beyond these skyscrapers in Nairobi. They should go to Kiambu and beyond and just see that we're in third world country, where one half of the country is still living below the poverty line, where we have the highest unemployment rate in Eastern Central Africa. So I mean, it's misplaced completely the way we keep looking at other, to try and please the audience in most Western countries. But on the austerity, I think this is very elusive. I'm sure if you have worked with government for years, every government that has come to power from Kibaki to Uhuru has always said that we are going to introduce austerity. We'll cut down on tea and flowers and newspapers and travel and all those things, but nothing is
need
happening.
to be cleared by the head of public service before we make any trouble.
It's not happening.
That is on though, but what impact?
It's not. The government lives large. You can just see from the vehicles of Kenyan government. You know, I once went to Sudan. CS, a minister, is driving a Toyota Corolla. I mean, you've seen in some of these countries. And in our country, forget about a minister. If you are like our friend running a state corporation, you can't be driving even on anything less than a V8. So we live large.
Actually, and here is one driving on 1.8cc vehicle, so it's not.
Well, that's personal, I'm sure.
no, office car. But on this, can I chime in? I think there are many things we can say. The other day, President Museveni reminded us Museveni's grasp of the political economy of things is very sharp and is very up to it. And one of the points he touched on was the ratio of the economy that's in the informal sector. And that's important because when we heap taxes on areas we can collect, we're dealing with a relatively smaller part that's in the monetary economy. I don't know.
Modern or formal or whatever.
Formal economy, modern, yeah. And he said the subsistence component of the Ugandan economy, which he thought was a great thing, and it was indeed a great thing, reduced from 68% to about 31%. That's progress, huh? In many ways, in terms of funding modern developments through the instruments that we are talking about. And you don't have to go far. You don't even have to go out of our skyscrapers. Right here in this town, during these heavy rainfalls, what has happened in the areas of Mukuru kwa Ruben, Mukuru kwa Njenga, Mandare Valley, and many other areas are totally catastrophic. Somebody says you wake up at night and your things are, you are actually drowning. It almost like a dream. Life is really on the edge. I think these are the things we need to focus on, as it were. That we are not the same as the others. That's definitely true. Having said that, then, what instruments are appropriate in this age? That assessment that we also need to be able to give views on, so that the pace at which we are doing is consistent with our background reality. I agree that you can't always compare with America, and that's definitely not the right thing to do.
And Singapore.
But even in their richness, the issues of underdevelopment there, particularly urban poverty, inner city poverty, is real, and they confront it year in, year out. It hasn't gone away whatsoever. India is a huge country, but the proportion of the Indian economy that's exposed to the world is the proportion of the Indian economy that is in the external world, as it were, including trade and so on, is a small one. The biggest sense of the economy is internal, not subject to the whims of the IMF and so on and so forth. They resist that very strongly, so they can move at their own pace. And that, of course, weakness is also with that approach, when you refuse to accept what others are doing and you stubbornly do what you have to do. You know, it's not always something a cause for celebration. So all that he says is that we should manage our economies on the basis of our own realities that we face today. Up to today, there are people who still think that, oh, this thing we are talking about flood is not true. I haven't seen any flood. If you're in your village where there is no flood, doesn't mean there are no floods next door. You know, that kind of thing we have to eliminate and make decisions on the basis of managed numbers. You know, you've seen numbers, allow numbers to be questioned so that you end up with robust numbers. Allow Professor Xen here to go over those numbers in his business class and let us see which numbers are real. And let us begin to use that. Maybe KNBS also, the Bureau of Statistics will also change.
Well, we want to speak also on the austerity measures flop, because it seems when we talk about the teas and the flowers, we're just penny wise, pound foolish, right? We look at with the 2.6 billion shillings we're talking about for renovations and luxury and travels. I think that's where we're missing it. So when we don't really hit the target, now we want to raise the taxes. But it's a policy implementation that is wrong in the first place.
I think that it needs to be sharpened. There's no question. And this must be a continuous process. From the day it's pronounced or even signed down to law, we need to be out there worrying about its misuse. And I think we in Kenya, we are a fairly robust economy by our standards in the continent. There's no question about that. But we have to put a lot more care, as it were. South Africa, that we have quoted many times, before the majority election, one of their parastatal, the power parastatal, ESCOM, I think it was called,
ESCOM, yes.
Was touted to be model, blah, 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 blah. But they are working in a sort of a select segment of society. After the elections came, and now they had to reach out and provide power to everybody, including those in Johannesburg, for example, in the Soweto, Alexandra in Cape Town, and so people who had been forgotten. When they began to do that and to reduce the degree of subsidies into ESCOM, ESCOM became a basket case. Now they have, I don't know if they have more times off than their own at the moment, and they were very sophisticated. They are going all the way into nuclear energy as well. So I think paying attention to where you are, how to manage it, how to sustain it is going to be very, very important. That can't be, as I say, that can't be a function for people to keep quiet and let only the president pronounce on it, and they are quiet. We have gone through these forex challenges we had. So the only voice you could hear in public domain was what was said in State House. But what was the central bank thinking? What was finance thinking? Those had not come out. I think we need that so that we can engage more robustly and come out with consensus points.
Can I mention something on austerity? Because I think he has brought a very interesting issue. I think he has worked for the government. He has worked for the government, not as much, but the issue of austerity amazes me. Because I've even told some people, if you get a photo of a government VITS, please send me that photo. I've never seen a VITS in the national government, a VITS in this county government. But I think there are two reasons why austerity is very hard to deal with. One is this country is very class conscious. We are very specific about how people perceive us. And number two, we use lack of austerity to demonstrate power. So how else do I show that I have power unless I use a big car, I have a big office? And I think it's the time we changed our sociological thinking about what gives you status and what gives you power. And as long as those physical materials, it's going to be very hard to deal with austerity. Can you imagine me as a minister driving to my office in a VITS or walking? People don't think I'm a minister. Even if I go for a political rally, driving a VITS, nobody will vote for me. Yeah, you have to demonstrate power. And we need to change that thinking.
Right, you're in a country where also the CS, if you can remember, they were renovating the office so that also they can have their makeup room and a dining room before, if you may remember. Yeah, Bill Okero.
Another perspective, I think, is the issue of governance. Let me tell you, all these things about lack of austerity and all the things we are discussing is really about governance. It's about leadership. And that is our biggest challenge this country and in many of our developing countries, including South Africa and all this. And it is this poor governance that underpins the wastage, the inefficiencies, the corruption, and all those things that you see. For example, this government is less than 2 years old, and today the headline in one of the papers is "Tales of Broken Hearts as Kenya Kwanza's hyped projects stall." They're listing dozens of projects that the president launched just the last 2 years. All of them have stalled. I mean, and then you're telling us, please collect more taxes. I collect money, you start at 25 billion, in coins or Dam, something, you launch it, and with fanfare, that's the end of it. I mean, it's listed there. So unless we deal with the issue of governance, really, which also underpins how we spend our money, which is the main concern for many Kenyans, rationalization of public, service, the expenditure control, I think the frugality in which how we spend our resources. This is why if you go to Ethiopia, I'm telling you, the value for money, the value for the shilling in that country will surprise you. They have a very small budget because of the low tax collection, which is 7% of the GDP, but the money that you are allocated, you must spend it in a way that is completely, it's not the way we are doing it. Here you do a road today, 5 billion. After 1 year, it's washed out, and we have to do again the same road, and you don't understand what's going on. Somebody has approved it, somebody has okayed it. We see it everywhere we live, everywhere we drive. Roads don't last a year or 2 years. So we're just repeating. So it's governance is another matter. If I was the president of this country, which I hope someday and his friend will
no, let him finish. Maybe he's pointing at Iraqi.
His friends will one day decide that they're tired of it.
I hope as a running mate. Are you pointing to me as a running mate?
Yes. So if I were really, I would focus on the issue of governance, and I will not need to tax Kenyans. I'm telling you, Kenyans are paying more taxes. We collect more revenue. I have to repeat this every time in every show than all these African countries combined up to now, and yet we are not. We are saying we are not collecting enough taxes, and I think this is very unfortunate. We are really collecting taxes. The issue is not about taxes. The issue is how we spend it. Let us focus on other aspects of the economy. We have Parliament. When we and him were in Parliament just a few years ago, the budget of Parliament was less than 20 billion. Now it's going to 60-something billion. So look at it everywhere. It's crazy. We have devolved this country's functions significantly to the counties. Counties get less than 10% of the total budget, 300-something billion out of the almost 4 trillion. But what do? We still have money allocated to the ministries the same way as if there was no devolution. And so, I mean, really, if I was the president, I would focus internally on these things. And I don't need to tax people, because we're discouraging investors, we're discouraging businesses.
Even if we're talking about the effects of floods, we have the Ministry of Transport now seeking, I think, 30 billion shillings for the repairs of the roads. 330 million shillings also will be used to, try and help and aid some of victims of the floods and maybe just repairing some of their homes at the end of the day. But when it comes to transparency to this, because I think that has been the question, even these 330 million shillings on how it will be spent and the 30 billion shillings for the repairs of the roads, how do we carry out like auditing of these projects that we know this particular figure has not been blotted? Because I'm wondering what has been done on the ground so that they may come with this particular figure. Well, you can just remember the figure here of the expressway. Just after a few days, everyone was raising questions. I mean, what audit have you done that you've come up with that particular figure?
Yeah, may I just throw in something on that? I think you can't overemphasize the point that we have made over and over around this table. That it's important to look critically at expenditure, both qualitatively in terms of what's the value for money, quantum, do we need that much? Can you do more with the less, and so on? That's an aspect that we tend to brush aside and perhaps not focus on too much. It's very, very important indeed, so that the shilling goes as far as you can push it. It is true that if you're in Ethiopia and you're spending the birr, the cost structure, if there's a way in which you can measure, it's difficult, but if there's a way in which you can measure the how unit costs vary across countries, you'll find that in Ethiopia, there are fairly low unit costs if you compare with Kenya. I guess it's the years of accumulated inflation on our side here and liberal spending and not being too tight on controlling expenditure, not punishing. People just seem to steal and get away with it and so on. I was intrigued to see a headline about one of our envoys in one of the major countries of the world who is under investigation for corruption. What should happen in a case like that? That should be halted. The decision should be rescinded until the matter is cleared. Not until it has gone to court and be determined. He himself or herself should say, until this is cleared, I can't accept an appointment in a foreign country where you're going to be accredited, and so on. So those are, but you can't change that in advance. When it comes, you must stamp out on it. If we do that, then our exhortations and exhortations for higher taxes, our decisions to raise taxes, will be better understood because people will see what the taxes are actually doing. It's a matter we keep saying, but that's really, 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 really important.
Mm-hmm. Even as you're talking about that envoy, who is Maduki as well, there were questions which were raised, and I think we had the IALA legislators coming against this particular appointment of Maduki until, investigation is done in the EAC on how financial malfeasance was carried out under his tenure, and why also President Ruto has appointed him before the expiry of that tenure at the EAC. I think there's a court case which is live at the East African Court of Justice. No, yeah. Bill Okelo, you want to comment on this briefly?
Yeah. Let me comment on the budget estimates for repairs of flood and 30 billion. But this is not something new. People in that Ministry of Infrastructure and Roads, these people are used to these things. They know that when there is this kind of situation, there's an opportunity for more money. It's an opportunity to make money also. Because then you'll get Treasury immediately open up the pass because there's an emergency and money is required, whereas the normal circumstances, it might be difficult for you to get a exchequer release. Here now you have an opportunity. So you have to, ask for money that, is substantial because that's what they do. But again, the issue for many Kenyans is how the money is being spent. Look at what is happening to the flood victims who are in camps, who are in various camps, struggling to get even food, struggling to get blankets and tents and so forth. And yet the money is being, the government keeps announcing we are providing this amount of money. Look at what's happening to particularly these people in Nyando floods and Budalangis and those places. You would think some parts of this country are more equal than others. You see how the support is given, for example, to what happened in this Naivasha area. And then compared to what is happening to other flood areas like Tana River. People have been suffering and living literally in crisis since the rains started the last 1 year. So the government really, in terms of how this money is being used, both in terms of the equity and in terms of the actual utilization of that money, it's really very disappointing. So every emergency, every flood that comes, Kenyans have got used to a situation where we are now relying on Red Cross and international agencies and aid agencies to support people instead of government coming out, literally, and given they have the capacity. And every government, including national and county, has a contingency fund, by the way. Every county governments have huge contingency. I think about 5% is provided for in their budgets. But you don't see how this money gets spent. You're being told, hakuna pesa. The government goes immediately on TV and says we are looking for international aid agencies. And then you see international countries committing money. UK says I'm giving 300 million, this one, US says I'm giving 100 millions. You don't know, so then, you see people are struggling to get a glass of water or food even in the camps here in Mathare. And you are now watching these announcements of how much money is being released by all these agencies. So, which is why I keep saying that unless you address the issue of governance, really, you cannot resolve the problems of this country. It's not about taxes.
It's interesting. The other day I was reading a story about India, and India was saying they don't accept foreign aid in case of a crisis. If there's a flood, if there's an earthquake, they don't want foreign aid, which is a part of their national pride. But here we are very eager to go asking people, tell them, help us and so on. And I'm actually amazed, anytime there's an emergency in this country, the first boat to arrive are always Red Cross, which surprises me. Because you have police, you have emergency services.
National disaster management.
Yes, why are they always overdone? Why are they always overdone by Red Cross? But I think I agree with you. We need more transparency on how money is used. If you're going to tell us you're going to use that billion to repair roads, we need to know which roads. There should be a list of this. The following roads were destroyed. They were built using this money. They repaired with this money.
Yeah, that transparency.
It should not be random. And then if you not, somebody should have mentioned about, you talked about the envoy to Russia being investigated. There's a story on page 4 of the Business Daily. Lawyers fought picking of ex-MCA as a regional judge.
Yeah, that's crazy. I saw it.
So I think whether it is building roads or repairing roads, appointing people as giving people jobs, we need transparency. Because it is only through transparency that governance improves.
That one is
and
crazy.
We get value for our money, whether it is tax money or whether it is levies.
All right, I wanted just to ask still on austerity measures, because we are moving towards the EV, electrical vehicles. And is there any rhyme or reason that Kenya also will pick up McKinsey, the consultants firm, which has been commissioned right now to conduct cost-benefit analysis for the country, or the country's transition from internal combustion engines vehicle to electric vehicles? Don't we have enough consultants here that cannot do that particular job?
Actually,
because I know this,
actually on this table.
Yeah. Bill Okero, let's just begin from there.
No, I mean, look, what matters is who is paying the money. If most of our consultants by the government are always in the form of, Sako will tell you, it's in the form of technical assistance. So it depends from the donor. If it is IMF, World Bank, Americans, or whatever, those guys, they will, no, of course. There's no way they will give it to these folks sitting on this table. So I think that is one of it. And I'm sure it must be funded by, and it must be in form of a loan. It's a technical assistance that has been given. And because all these things about eco and electrical and all those things that, the things that America is pushing, and the Western countries are pushing on the environment and climate things. So I'm sure they're the ones who are funding. And probably that's the reason why that McKinsey is given. But McKinsey is not necessarily that they're the only ones who can do it. Many Kenyans can do that way.
Which actually, when I saw that story, I was getting concerned because I'm sure that's something we can comfortably do at my university or any other university. So if something as simple as finding out the impact
But you've been the research funds, you don't have it. You've been denied any research fund. You don't have the wherewithal as far as research is concerned.
Totally agreed, but the same government should have said we have capacity in this country that can do this work. And we could have done comfortably that work. We probably understand the Kenyan market and the people who are going to do it. And it is a concern to me as an academic that a lot of work that is done by outsiders can be done by the local researchers. We have local expertise. And nobody sees that as a problem. Then we start complaining that people in the university don't do research, but you don't give us research to do. You give it to other people.
But, Prof, I hear that, I agree, and I think look at it simply, the quantum of researchers and expertise obviously has been growing because we have been building up these institutions, much bigger institutions than they are. But to what extent is the university itself pushing its way into this? Because sometimes you have to earn this, you have to win over, so that you're a resource that cannot be passed over. And then, of course, we do need lobbying, that we do not take external expertise unless our own expertise has sort of pronounced on it. We should do that because they understand the situation a lot better. But I really think that our universities have relied too long on receiving funding in their budgets and so on. There was a time when the University of Nairobi was awash with cash because they were creative in how they were doing things, and you would think then they can, apart from increasing their salaries, they can probably put it in research and do a lot more work. But that has sort of been curled back, that's the word I want to use, has been curled back. And now that they are now also the begging bowl, it should not be like that.
But with all due respect, I would have wanted to see that contract floated in the newspaper so that we bid like anybody else.
Yes.
Now we just saw the results. I need to correct you that the University of Nairobi has really put emphasis on research. In fact, there's no other area they are putting more emphasis than research now. Mm-hmm. But I think we are talking again for transparency. Float that contract, rest all bid, we see the winner. Yeah. We will not be seeing it in the media.
Right, but we've already been given the insight by Bilo here on how that contract has been given at the end of the day.
Whoever pays the piper calls the tune.
It did. All right, we want to focus now on still on austerity measures as well. on why also the controller of budget has lost a beat to monitor counties' bank accounts in real time, derailing efforts to tame the irregularities that have clouded how the devolved units pay contractors and other bills. Legislators also failed to adopt a bill that sought to change the law to allow the controller of budget, that is Margaret Nyakango, access the bank accounts. The failed attempt allows counties to escape scrutiny and growing concerns over massive corruption in the payment of key accounts that the budget controller sought real-time access to include the Consolidated Fund, Equalization Fund, and county revenue funds, granting the controller of budgets access to the bank accounts of the 47 units, which is key in ensuring that counties will only pay contractors whose payments had been approved by the budget controller, besides cutting down on fictitious claims. Let's just try and see, when we're talking about transparency, austerity measures, why they have denied the COG on this. We know, of course, there was a bill as well. That bill didn't see also light of day in both the National Assembly and the Senate.
Of course, they pay money.
They pay money.
County governments pay money.
I thought even the Senate now, that will have carried the day, because the Senate is
the
the custodian of the counties.
Let me tell you, if there's one thing that the county governors will protect, it is that one, because then they won't survive. The moment the controller is given the power for real-time access to their accounts, then there'll be no way they can divert money to projects that have not been approved and so forth. And so I am sure they will influence both houses to ensure that there's no such law that will be enacted. That one I have no doubt in my mind. But let me say this, you know, the controller, of course, has the power to authorize release of funds to the counties. And you know, as the counties spend the money, they will submit returns. And then based on, you know, they look at the returns, and again, they'll approve the next tranche of money, exchequer that they release. And quite often, I mean, this money is specific on the activities and projects which are listed out in that application to the controller. But what happens is that the moment the controller then approves and the money leaves the central bank to the county government's account, then these projects, as often it's shelved, and other projects now are prioritized, and money is then, you know, given to on that, and then this one's end up spending bills. That's why you have that pending bill situation. And this is not something that is happening only in counties, it happens in national government. And this is why we have this crisis of pending bills. But the Public Finance Management Act is so clear on the penalties and, you know, the offenses and the penalties relating to this, that if Treasury was only willing to act on the provision of the Public Finance Management Act, there'll be no pending bills in this country, let me tell you. But Treasury is the most, I think, the weakest link in the entire public finance management in this country. And that unfortunately is the reason. I mean, at the time I went through, you know, all the offenses and all the penalties provided for in the PFM Act relating to all these things. I mean, it's so stringent on how you can control. You know, forget about persistent breach of financial whatever, but even when they are, you know, an occasional whatever, there's including appointment of PSs as accounting officers. Yes, who appoints a PS as an accounting officer? It's Treasury. They can withdraw, they have the powers to say, okay, you are no longer going to be the accounting officer because you have misused money, or you have misappropriated money, or you have misallocated, or you did not meet, you have exceeded budget, or you spent money, or you signed on to a debt which you are not supposed to sign on to. They would never exercise that. And it's all about political expediency. It's about politics. That's why I keep saying this thing is all about governance. Treasury would fear the boss if he takes action on a PS. If you antagonize the county governor, you will probably get a call also from executive somewhere that why you are harassing our governor of Busia. He's a friend of ours. Can you allow him to? So this thing, at the end of the day, all these things dovetail into the issue of governance. So it's unfortunate that Parliament does not want, and the same MPs are the ones who keep complaining that, and senators, that counties are misusing money. But when now the controller asks for more teeth,
there's a bill actually,
teeth to bite,
it will see the light of day.
No.
Because most of the senators there also, they know they will be on that particular seat. As they have ambitions. So they won't really let it fly.
They want to be governors.
They want to be governors at the end of the day. Right? Bunyasi Sako, you want to comment on it? Now that you wanted to become a governor.
Yes. Sorry.
Would be in support of this.
When I look at this, and that has always been my concern, even when I was in Parliament, that we talk about governance, very critical. There's no question about that. In fact, if you are to get a change element into this system that does not require a change in the tax rates, it's governance. Do better with the resources you've got, follow through in accordance with the law, be decisive on outcomes and so on. That would make a hell of a difference. If people's expectations are that this could catch up with me sooner rather than later, whether I'm retired or dead, literally if you're dead also, your estate is still there, people will be a lot more cautious. Otherwise, it really gets completely wild, and that I think is something we really must seek as a nation to contain, so that the money we get, the little money we collect, has the biggest impact that we can get. If not, we're not going to be able to catch up the game. Those who do want to exaggerate costs are going to run ahead, and their capacity is going to be high because they're already in decision-making positions to exaggerate estimates, to understate as you go in, to understate what the requirements should be, so that when implementation begins, they have over-provided, and that money that never sees the light of day. I think that we can't afford. We are a really, really poor nation. When I look at how many people, many kids can't go to university or can't go to technical institutions because they can't afford the 5,000 shillings there might be to pay, and here you get, people in making billions and so on. I think it's completely cruel, and that is something that we must focus on. The president will never meet his goals if this aspect of governance is not tightened. It's very important to have it tightened.
Mm-hmm. You see, the issue of country, let me just repeat. The controller of budget, I don't know whether you know this, but the controller of budget has offices in every county. There's an officer who sits in every county, and actually that's where the scrutiny starts. Mm-hmm. Once you apply for your money, you don't even come all the way to Nairobi here. So there's no doubt, from my experience, that those officers even themselves get compromised. And I think the controller herself, office also needs to do her job, really, because if they do their job, some of these issues that are happening in county government, particularly money being misappropriated or diverted, or this
35 accounts
pending, or 35-40 accounts, and this issue of pending bills also would not have a reason if those guys really did their job, because every single money that they spend, there has to be an approval by the controller of money, and that is before they release the next tranche of money. So how do you then allow someone whom you know has collected money to build this facility, but then in the returns you find the facility has not been built and the money has gone to some other activity, but when you approved it, the release of that money, it was for this particular which was voted for it's there in the budget, but the money has not gone into. So you keep doing the same things as controller, and I think this is an unfortunate thing. It happens that that office itself, they need to do a lot of work really to try and tighten how the officers on the ground handle these things.
But tell me also, when it comes to the banking, because looking at the PFM, it really stipulates where the money should be stashed.
Yes.
Is the central bank.
Yes.
So how then do we account for these other commercial banks that you can find, like a county, was it?
The account is with 200 accounts.
Yeah, 200 accounts, Homo Bay.
Yes.
Yeah. How then do you...
It's a breach of the law.
It's a breach of the law.
Yeah. And the auditor keeps saying every day, this county has 30 accounts which are not supposed to be there. But who should be stopping that? Controller. See, I'm not giving you a release, go and shut down those accounts.
Yeah. So I think there are clear no penalties for breaching those regulations.
In the law, there is.
There are penalties, but they have not been implemented.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm happy that...
which is a penalty, so that at least...
No, in the PFM Act, there are very extensive penalties for all those things.
But I'm also happy in the last 1 week or so, a lot of former governors have gone to court being accused of misusing funds. But there's an issue you raised that we should have discussed more, pending bills. When you talk with the national government, the debt, do we include those pending bills in our national debt?
No.
We should include them because they are serious as any other debt. Because we should not be talking about paying a Eurobond when we cannot pay our own locals.
Yeah.
We should also pay them.
You see, the pending bills that we were told last year, the government is 641 billion. Now we are told when the first report of the audit team came out, they have verified only 110 billion.
Yes.
This one has been verified and they should be paid. But what happens every year is that this 110 will not get paid. We've seen in counties, the money will be released. It will be budgeted for pending bills, but again, it will get diverted. I mean, this is the challenge we have. You remember under Uhuru, how they tried, Treasury, Captain O'Connor saying, we'll clear this in the next few months, and nothing happens. And the money gets released, and the money gets diverted. So I agree. I mean, if we struggle to pay foreign debtors, why don't we pay our people?
That's it.
This is what will boost the economy.
Right. So this is real time that she wanted. Where is IFMIS in terms of also tracking this money to the user end, which is the counties? Can't we really track what she's really wanting on real time? Or how is IFMIS also not really a game changer when it comes to transparency? Where is the fallings or misgivings of?
I think about we now got the analytics, the tools to track, maybe not perfectly, but perhaps we don't even need to be perfect in our tracking. We just, to the degree that we can determine that things aren't going right. We talked about the role of the control of budget. You remember a while ago when she said her own position, she found that the CFS was budgeted 3 times. And everybody wanted her silence. Nobody picked it up. Parliament did not seem to have picked it. Maybe they did, but there's nothing in the public domain. And everybody else. It's those kinds of things that strengthen the office. But there are also very many other aspects, clearly. We should speak her voice fully. I remember in the last administration, toward the last administration, we were in a meeting in Mombasa and she had arrived alone from her office. She had paid her own ticket, but they could not release the money for her to spend for the control of budget. And the reason was simply that she was being hard on Treasury at that time. So these kinds of things come in. And lately they said, oops, when you used to be head of a cooperative or some SACCO, you didn't, I don't know, do what, some years back before she went in public life. At a time when she was clamping down on expenditure controls and so on, because she has powers that the Treasury does not have. They can't override her under the law. So it's a question of, what do you call it, governance and making decisions around the facts that you know. I sometimes get the impression that in public domain, you sometimes want to say, I don't want to know the facts because I'll be forced to make a decision. Just keep them out. I don't know them officially, and so on. Because when you do, you have to act. And if you can act in your own space, and the next one is not acting, you feel maybe that you are going out on a limb. But I think people should make decisions with their own space, so we see where the buck is stopping before it.
Right. Yeah, Bilo, can I just pick up on IFMIS on the other side of a break? Yeah, briefly. Right, we're going to take a short break. I think time is ticking up to 8 o'clock. We shall look at that particular issue of IFMIS and transparency as well. And also on the table is the issue of the one man, one vote, one shilling that is gaining traction right now. Are we hacking back to what BBI was actually trying to front as far as that is concerned? And also, we shall look at the stabilization fund that is meant now to stabilize or maybe try to cushion the fuel pump prices that are expected to go up as well. Are we hacking back also to some of Uhuru's policies with the current administration? We'll take a short break.